Well, I moved to Los Angeles by the end of 1976, and I was here previously in 1974 for the filming of The Desert People, my movie. I was here for 5 weeks and moved back to London. I did the post-production, and I decided to move back to LA to see what happens to me. I needed a change from Europe, and especially London weather. It's kind of, I really needed sunshine. So, I said, well, maybe LA is good. I had such a great experience with the Desert People. It was a wealth of experience in my life. So, and then I moved here. And the first time I came in, I was staying with two people that became my LA parents in a way, Stanley and Elise Greenstein. And they were very social. So they introduced me a lot of people. And we went out every night to our openings, parties, events. It was really, really every day was something to do. Someone new to meet, So besides, they helped me a lot in the production of the film, The Desert People. They connected me with the people, film world and LA, art world in LA. It's something that LA gives you a sense of solitude, because we're all so private. You live in your house. You go to your car, you go to the post office, you go to the supermarket, you meet a friend. There's no human connection like, let's say, New York or Buenos Aires or London. You leave your house and you're confronted with people. You become social immediately. Even in LA, I have very little contact with, even now, even though I've been here for this house for many years, very little contact with my neighbors, almost none. I tried to, but they don't seem to be interested, So then I decided I was in that studio, Sunset and Gardner, and I worked with the idea of photographing my friends from Antwerp or Brussels or Paris, to document who my friends were in their context, in where they lived, in relationship to the city, to find a way to make my friends come to me. So I thought, well, artists make portraits. I call all my close friends and acquaintances, mostly friends, who I met through my previous time in LA.
David Lamelas and I know each other, I'd say, since the mid-70s, 1970s. I first came here in 1975. David came, I think, a couple years later, a year or two later, from London as a young artist wanting to meet people and live in Los Angeles. We met through mutual friends. We just hung out in the same peer group, basically. His career in the States didn't really take off until later, so he was trying to make a life in Los Angeles. He was better known in Europe, so he always had friends or other artists supporting him. We'd often go and visit and stay with them. Calls me up one day, I can't remember when this was. This must have been sometime in the early 80s. And he says, Dorit, I'm in trouble. People were after him, and it sounded like the mob with the way he talked about it. He owed somebody in South America a lot of money to make a film years earlier, and he never paid it back. And he was freaking out. He said, what should I do? I don't have any money to give them. And I said, why don't I go as your lawyer? And so that's what we did. We show up at the address, and David would just look at me, introduce me as his lawyer. We would sort of go into the corner and speak another language between ourselves, pretending that we were really talking over what we could do. I guess it seemed more believable to the gentleman who was after him. We developed this new contract. They wrote it up and signed it, and we left. That was it. Yeah, I've gotten him out of other trouble too, but that was a big one. Felt like he needed to spend more time with people one-on-one, because LA is a very difficult city to connect with people on any intimate level.
Jeremy Iacone. I'm a writer, filmmaker. I'm in LA since 1975, and I'm grateful to the people I've met over the decades, and David has always been a very good friend. So I've known him since 1975. On a bus going to Century City to something that was called Filmex, it was a film festival, I would see getting on the bus on Sunset Boulevard would be this guy who turned out to be David. And he'd get on, we'd look at it, nod, and one day, standing online to get tickets, we began talking about movies. And David at that point was interested in making movies. He had come to LA actually to make movies. That was his focus. So I knew of his reputation in Europe that he told me about, but I didn't know to what extent he had been so successful. And the LA people thing evolved. I didn't know to what the scope of it. He just said, "Can I draw you one day?" And he said he had a few others. And it was years later that I realized, got to see what it was. Because David then started moving around in New York, London, Buenos Aires. It evolved, I think, out of his personal relationships. David was making this project. I mean, he didn't share it with us to the extent that he was working on this project. Well, that's David. I mean, he's not talking about, he's doing. And his whole world, conceptual art, was something that was really never discussed. And there was an exhibit here a few years ago at LA County, and that's when I got to see myself amongst others.
And at the same time, when I was talking to them, I was drawing, like I'm talking to you now. I would do a drawing, and after 1 hour, we finished the drawing, and that was the meeting. And so there were 40 hours of conversation. The actual piece is about those 40 hours of conversation, of interaction, So I decided little by little how the piece evolved into more conceptualized project. Like I would photograph each drawing and be projected as a projection on the wall as like screen dimensions. Because one of the things I learned in Hollywood is that when somebody has been on the screen, they say, "Oh, he or she is larger than life." So then I decided to make my friends larger than life.